Hi, Elad. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good.
I'm I'm excited to connect with you on what you've been building. I know I got a sneak peek in one of our team meetings, but maybe for those who aren't familiar with the demo you've built, can you give a little bit about what we're going to be going through today?
Yeah. So basically, this is a kind of like a multi-brand reference example that we've built, and it's an example that's pretty much ready to start working with and extending on and modifying to your needs. And maybe I should clarify what does multi-brand. What do we mean when we say multi-brand? So one of the things we're hearing, especially from enterprises and companies that have multiple websites, not just across the globe, but also multiple different brands, is that they kind of have difficulty. I mean, understandably, handling all these little, some smaller, some larger brand websites. Given they'd like to have a shared code base and the same components, but then styling control that lets every website look different, and along with that come the permissions and everything that you can think of when you think about, okay, I have this enterprise with 50 brands. How do I now manage this sanely from a
Yes.
technical perspective?
Yeah.
And then in many cases, customers would like to maybe use one content space. I mean, in each CMS, the name is different. It's a space for Contentful. It could be a stack or a data set for Sanity or whatnot. But still, it's so much easier if you have the same schema and the same data set and then the same code base, but you'd like to have multiple brands working. And there's a, a, like a bunch of different concerns, perspectives, things to consider in
Yeah.
that scenario.
And it's true with having the same code base and same schema. There's and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's less likely for things to go wrong, especially when it comes to having so many different people in there and wanting to update different pieces of content. Would you say that's fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, the game here is the more centralized you are, like
Hmm.
using one space, so it's all, using the same code, so everybody's up to date with the same code version, and you don't have like 50 different repos with various patches in each, and you have the same space, so inherently the same schema and so on. But then the other side of the equation is like editor control and how much configurability you can have
Yeah.
and how much can you tailor each brand's website. Like, I think naturally that's what driven a lot of like forking along the road. So you'll find enterprises that have like a whole bunch of different technology stacks and different versions, things that started off the same way and kind of branched off. And at some point they're like, okay, we we have to rethink the tech stack anyway, and we want to, rethink how we handle all these brands.
Exactly, exactly. Well, all right. So this is the big challenge or the problem that you've been working on solving. So maybe let's dive into it. Share with us how you've solved this problem with multi-brand.
Okay. So first of all, to give some context about these examples, so we have, for those not yet knowledgeable about it, we have this entire repo of examples under the StackBit Themes organization. There's the StackBit examples monorepo, and it has a whole bunch. Each one of these folders, of course, it's an example or a reference implementation of something. And some time ago, we built the original localization or internationalization example based on Next.js and Contentful, and it shows you how to use both like object level, field level localization that's really integrated with both the StackBit editor, and then it uses standard Next.js internationalization support. So I had already this example, which already is based on our tutorials and our other examples. And then I added another layer on top of it, still Next.js and Contentful as the basic tech stack, which is multi-brand support based on the same code base, same repository. So it's not entirely a new example, and it kind of builds on all the other examples that we have. There's like a lineage to it from the tutorial to the full level example, which I think is helpful because you can
Yeah.
start simple. And let's talk about how it looks like. So here I have, this is actually the work of Sean Davis, the
Yeah.
sandwich site, the sandwich tutorial, which is below. And when you start off, it looks like, it seems like a pretty basic site. And I do have here, since it's based on the localization example, I do have here multiple locales. So I can switch between, different locales, and then I can, these are StackBit features that are already existing. I have a sitemap that only shows pages in the relevant locale, and everything on site looks exactly like it should. I have permissions for all locales, but some users probably are going to have limited permissions, and they can only work on their locale. So already I have here in the same brand, let's say like this sandwich, Ohio Best Sandwich brand. I have here multiple locales and all, the StackBit features. And let's see how I can switch to another brand, and then I'll talk about, how it's going to look like for content editors, and what's the code that supports that, and all that.
Sounds great.
Okay, so I'm running this locally. If you haven't noticed, I'm in local development mode. So I can easily switch like locally on my machine between different brands. And the way I do that is I just have an environment variable, which locally it's in a .env file. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to stop both the Next.js server and the StackBit dev server. And instead of using the sandwich brand, let's go to the oil brand.
Yeah.
And I'll even do, just to make sure that Next is not caching anything, in terms of like theming and styles. So I'm rerunning Next.js, I'm rerunning StackBit dev.
Yeah.
And the studio, the visual editor, is going to reconnect once it's up. So
to this new project, or to this other?
Yeah, the same project, to the same content space.
Just different content.
Yeah, different content and different, let's say, a theme style or a theme system. So here it's pretty rudimentary. Like I only changed the colors, but you can see how, since this is using Tailwind, other projects are using Chakra. All of these frameworks, they have like a very extensive programmatic theming system, meaning you can read from CMS or basically from anywhere and just affect about anything. So anything that is, imaginably configurable can be configured quite easily. So this brand also has localization, just has, in this case, a homepage, basically one in Spanish, one in English. It's the same components as you see in all of the other brands. So you can use a hero section, you can use a statistics section, everything that appears in the tutorial and in the other examples. And I'm showing you, like, the sitemap shows just that brand. If I add a page, it just gets added into that brand. And you can have like multiple brands as much as you'd like.
Wow.
So we already have here, in this kind of simple example, we already have both localization and multiple brands.
Yeah.
And I think it would be worth it to talk a bit about how it looks, like in terms of modeling, in terms of code. What does it mean to create that?
Yeah, that would be great, because even just, the power or the flexibility that this brings to content editors and also to developers, in the sense that then they can continue to work with one code base, while the content editors can easily be working on whatever site they're focused on, without having to worry that the content they change is going to impact another site of theirs.
Yeah, exactly. So we have, for many different reasons, we have customers that are asking, hey, we want to use one data set, so we know the schema and it moves in the same pace and everybody gets the same schema and code. How the hell do we handle that? Sorry, pardon my French, but it's a really I would say like foundational problem when companies are thinking about the content architecture and how the tech stack is going to look like. And of course, when you go into the CMS UI, you don't have any, like, you're going to have like maybe hundreds and thousands and maybe more pieces of content, and it's like completely non-feasible to find your way around all these breaks.
Yeah.
So let me first of all, I think it's worth to see how it looks like from the content modeling perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll talk about the code.
Perfect.
So content modeling wise, first of all, I've added this brand content type,
Okay.
which is pretty simplistic, just has a human-friendly name, which is, but it's field localized, so each brand can have, the name in various locales, and it has a slug, which in this case doesn't translate to URL. Slug doesn't mean a URL. In this case, it means like a fixed identifier string, and I'll show you in a minute why that's very helpful. So in terms of the different brands, I mean, basically the only thing you really have to do to add a new brand is to create a new instance.
Okay.
So all the brands that I currently have, these 3 brands are here. They're just objects. So Darn Good Sandwiches has its name in whatever locales are supported, and then it has a unique string name. It doesn't, change. You can change the display name. Usually you don't change the slug.
Yes.
And then what I've added to basically almost, and I would say like almost all the other content types here, like from the page level and down, is I added a field which is a reference to a brand object.
Oh, okay.
So anything that like from the page level to anything that's normally referenced by page, meaning sections and blocks and buttons, whatever and whatnot, has this brand field that is actually required. So you can't publish a page without having a brand set. And this goes to up, all the way down to the button level and so on.
Wow.
I do want to show you one thing which very explicitly doesn't have a brand reference, and this content type is called multi-brand configuration.
Okay.
And the idea is if you want to share things between the different brands. So in this example, it's just a shared footer text. Let me jump just for a second back to the site and show you, if you're looking here, you're seeing this footer text, part of a larger group. So you're going to have this footer in all of the different brands, of course, with the right colors and so on. But it's shared, it's localized, by the way. So, I know that, having both locales and different brands here kind of complicates the example, but then it makes it real because the kind of organizations that care about multi-brand are also pretty much inherently also, global in nature. So,
exactly.
So they need to have both. So this example tries to do both, but then tries to be simple enough, accessible enough, codes clear enough in order for you to understand what's going on. And then that's one other reason why I mentioned that this build on previous examples. So if you want to understand StackBit and how to architect, you start with the tutorial. So it has no locales, it has no brands. It's just, Next.js, Contentful, and then you add a dash of StackBit.
Exactly.
And then you go one step further and you learn about localization and all the different, aspects of it. Yeah. And then you go even one step ahead into the, enterprise strength world, and you add brands. So
exactly, you can do it kind of step by step.
Yeah. So it's not like I just went ahead and did everything at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
As talented as we are in StackBit, we go in steps, and we kind of follow the user journey in terms
exactly.
of
this is amazing. And there are so many, I can think of so many different, large enterprise companies that have multi brands, multi sites, but then there's part of, and it is usually, from what I've seen anyways, it seems to be the footer that is consistent across many of them.
Yeah, it could be, usually it's kind of like, terms and conditions, legalese. Sometimes there's like this menu that takes you to, corporate-wide information and so on. Yeah. So I would say, unlike some competitors or other, tools that we see that are, much more opinionated about, you have to do things in a certain way, StackBit, we really try to adapt to different content models, to different technologies. So
Yeah.
this is an implementation that has its own, it's opinionated, but you don't have to adopt exactly the same, choices that we've made. So, one could see if you have like, a portion of the website which is really multi-brand and has a bunch of pages and whatnot, you could have a different dedicated space that maybe, has different permissions, and then the website pulls data from that as well. And also we support multiple content sources. So, one could model it differently. Of course, in terms of like showing something as an example, if I use multiple spaces, it would kind of get out of hand. So I kept it all in one space, and I think it shows like the most like pure play, everything in the same place, but it's multi-brand. But it doesn't have to follow exactly, these lines. We're showing a reference. It's like a known working baseline that you can use it. It's open source. You can reason about how you would, you probably have in your organization all these constraints and limitations and wishes, and then you kind of build your own solution.
On top of,
So I think
that. Yeah.
that's our motto, I would say.
Elad, you mentioned a bit earlier the slug that was not used in the URL, but it was a unique identifier string. Where does that come into play, or was that for under each brand?
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's a good question because it ties right into also, what's the next step? I have the modeling, I have everything tied to a brand except very specific things which are shared. How does that translate into code?
Yes.
So these slugs, let's have a very quick look. So we've basically seen one of them. Here is like another example of a slug. And then coming back into the code, you'll see in the environment variable file, I have this environment variable called current parent slug. And I just put here the slug name for one of these brand objects. And then when the system boots up, it will basically only load any documents that are referencing this brand. So Jetpack Oils, the string is tied to a very specific brand object, and all the pages and everything within them or nested or referenced by them references a specific brand. So I can actually filter all the content. I mean, that's what the website does, and that's what also the StackBit Visual Studio Visual Editor is going to do. It's going to filter all the content based on that reference field. And I should probably show you how that's done.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So just keep in mind always when we're talking, because StackBit is like, a layer that you took, I don't know if I should say on top or in parallel to your working website. So the website already has this code. It has a content loader module that's not related to StackBit in any way, and it's connecting to Contentful, and it's getting like, okay, let's get the slug from the environment variable, and then I'm getting all the entries, and I'm filtering by the brand. So there's all this, like, the website itself is filtering by brand without needing StackBit. But then the question is, in terms of like when I work in the visual editor, how do I only see pages, any documents that are related to the brand? So let's go into the StackBit configuration file, which is programmatic these days. So it's TypeScript, JavaScript. I like to use TypeScript because it's really, really helpful in cases like this. And then if I'm looking at I'm not going to go over everything, but in the end, we have where you define all the attributes. There is stuff around localization, which I won't cover. It's actually documented in the localization example. I think the main thing that happens is the content filtering in terms of multi-brand, and it's happening here. There is this map documents callback that I can hook into, and on initial loading, and then whenever a document is updated or added, my callback is going to be called with the relevant documents.
Okay.
And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply my own filtering function, which is called, in this case, relevant to brand. It gets a document and has to decide whether, okay, is this document relevant to the current brand, which is set. So, for example, I won't go into all the details here, and the code is available. But if the document's model and if the content type is one of those like multi-brand types, it's always relevant. If it's a brand object, then if it's our current brand, then we're going to see it. Otherwise, we're not going to see it. And then any other document, okay, let's take the value of the brand field. Let's see if it matches, the references to the current brand. So this is kind of a filter function that in the end returns true or false, and basically determines everything that I can or cannot see out of the full content scheme. So for example, I mentioned, if we go back to the website, open the content tab, everything that I see here passed the filtering. So if I'm looking at the brands collection, I can only see Jetpack Oils, which is the brand that I'm in. So there's like one if line that I shown you like just a second ago is the one that basically filters out all the other brands, but I can see this one and I can edit it in whatever locales are supported here. And then I have multi-brand configuration. I can always see this single object in whatever brand I'm in because it's multi-brand. By the way, you can apply extra permissions and extra fine granularity in StackBit over what Contentful has. So in this case, I made editing multi-brand configuration content. I made it read only because it's kind of like an admin level feature. I would assume like if you want to create a brand, like if you want to create multi-brand content, you'd go to the CMS UI as kind of like an admin level, infrequent access, backend UI. But for editors, we're kind of like, always like creating the guardrails so you can do anything you want within the brand, but you can screw up other things, that affect others people. I mean, both your brands and other brands, we definitely don't want to mistakenly screw it up. So you can just the right guardrails. So that's based on the Contentful schema, but also as another layer, like Contentful doesn't have, it doesn't have a notion of pages, it doesn't have a notion of object level localization, doesn't have a notion of multi-brands, doesn't have all these things, making the CMS UI kind of like a back office, very powerful, but very risky system to work with. And of course, kind of complex because of the nesting and all that. While in StackBit itself, you can achieve, all the day-to-day tasks. Of course, there's like, roles and permissions. Some people are super users, some are very limited, but, we kind of make this distinction between stuff that admin level to the day-to-day.
Yeah, you can, and company to company or team to team, they can set different guardrails depending on who's working on what and what their responsibilities are.
Yeah. So I think, and this is kind of like a power feature, using all these like hooks that we already have and the ones we're gonna have in a roadmap to add in the future. It's really possible to really tailor the experience. So I could write content filtering that relies on a whole other set of logic, applies to different content model and whatnot. And I have here also a number of other hooks which also like subtly changing or fine-tuning the behavior. So I have here, for example, another one I won't like get into right now, but what it allows me is, and I haven't discussed it yet, but presets are one of the most powerful features of StackBit. So you can create a preset in brand A and use it in brand B or C, and you'll get the same components, exactly the same layout, texts, whatever, but of course with the color scheme of the target brand.
That's so powerful.
And to achieve that, I actually needed to just add another hook, which makes sure that when I duplicate a page from the sandwich brand into any other brand, it makes sure that all the brand references check out. Like the brand references that are baked into the preset, they get transformed into the target preset. So there's a bit of plumbing behind the scenes. And since I have document hooks, I can actually, not only when I create a page or stuff like that, but also when I create a preset or when I create a page from a preset, I get a chance as a developer to transform the document in whatever ways I need, with the end result being that I can, in the end, transparently or without the editor's knowledge, when you move things between brands and all that, it just works.
Yeah. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
And this project, I mean, as you mentioned, it was one that you continue to build upon, but and I'll link it down below in the video description, along with a lot of documentation and whatnot. But it's so powerful. And like you said, it's, if you're starting with StackBit, start with the basics and then kind of work your way up. Or if you're, at a point where you're already using StackBit, you can start from this point, this demo that you've built.
Yeah. So under the StackBit examples repo, scroll down a bit, you have the localization example, and then just on top of it, there's the internationalization and multi-brand example. And there's, of course, like any other examples, there is a README that applies basically just for this example and how it works, how to run it locally, and then how to go to production in terms of creating cloud projects, like one pen per brand and all the considerations that go into it. So yeah, do check it out. It's already live.
Yes, no, I'm very excited about this. This might, it's like children, you're not supposed to pick one of your favorites, but this might be my favorite demo I've seen you build. So
yeah, I mean, for me, it's like the most recent one is usually the preferred one, and then I get another one, and it's all the rage for me, and the rest is legacy. I don't know.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you a lot so much for your time and walking us through it. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.